Hi there. Susan Sontag wrote, "The painter constructs, the photographer discloses." And broadly speaking, that is true. But since photography was invented, there have been attempts to push the medium beyond its ability just to record. Photographers have tried to blur the edges of what is possible with this mechanical medium. And abstraction has been one of photography's most persistent themes. From the outset, just after photography was invented, Fox Talbot and Anna Atkins started experimenting with photograms. They were drawn to the interesting shapes that could be made as light passed through objects with varying degrees of transparency. Photosecessionist photographer Alvin Coburn has become best remembered for the images that he produced during a 6-week period. For almost all of his photographic career, he produced images that reflected reality. But for the short time in 1917, he broke away from these conventions and experimented with abstraction. In that time, he produced these portraits of artist Ezra Pound. He was trying to reproduce the Cubist ideas of incorporating multiple perspectives of the subject into a two-dimensional plane. Paul Strand's idea of abstraction was to stay within the bounds of reality, but to look at how tonal and textural variations could produce patterns, shape, and form. At the beginning of last century, Freud threw a spanner in the works by suggesting that we have a subconscious as well as a conscious. The equivalents produced by Alfred Stieglitz in the 1920s were an attempt to match pictures of clouds with inner psychological states. But I think these studies largely fail because the reality of the clouds overshadows any psychological meaning. As with conceptual photography, they remain pictures of clouds until one reads the text. Around the time of the Second World War, the US opened the country to allow for refugees. People like André Cartez, Man Ray, and Laszlo Moholy-Nagy impacted the American creative photography landscape. And they influenced experimental photographers like Aaron Siskind and Harry Callahan. Both of them were students of Moholy-Nagy at the Institute of Design in Chicago. And they discovered that in order to break the formal literalism of the image, one had to accentuate the graphic elements even to the point of distortion. Literalism in this context means that what you photograph will be what the viewer will see. These two photographers were very different. Callahan was straightforward and process-orientated, while Siskind was more entangled with the art world. Minor White produced what could be called abstract realism photographs. He would focus in on a subject so that the context or the bigger picture gets lost and the viewer is left with just the abstract elements of line and form. He was strongly influenced by Eastern religions and was trying to convey the connectedness of everything. Making these images was part of a way of dealing with his complex inner life. Man Ray and Moholy-Nagy both wanted to realign photography by finding ways to open up the possibilities for this documenting system. They did this by reconsidering what a photograph means and what it is. Surrealists like Man Ray wanted to explore the concept of reality as a whole and to question to what degree our subconscious influences how we experience life. Moholy-Nagy was more influenced by constructivism, and his focus was the integration of technology and industry into the arts. In 1960, the Museum of Modern Art staged what is being called a coming out party for abstract photography, and Aperture magazine devoted a whole edition to the subject. Next came a group of artists that have been called the subversives. They were determined to break the almost holy rules of straight photography. The straights were basically keen on keeping it real. But around the 60s, these conventional ideas were under attack. The traditional approaches of Edward Weston and Ansel Adams came crashing down. Robert Rauschenberg probably led the attack from the side of the photographic inflicted fine artists. Rauschenberg produced his combines, incorporating photography, paint, and any other materials he could find. This opened the door for artists like Andy Warhol, David Hockney, and Klaus Oldenburg. They transformed art, but the impact on photography was even more extreme. After decades of building the status of photography as a standalone aesthetic medium, these subversives reduced images to anonymous, ready-made art materials. If that wasn't enough of a blow to photography, the minimalist combined with the conceptual artists went on to reduce photography to a means of producing repetition or a method of disguising a subject so that a viewer couldn't work out what it was. Ray Metzger in the 1970s created images that combined multiple views within a sequence. They're made up of individual images, but the final picture is a construction, and one reads it abstractly. This then opened the door for artists in the 1990s, like Robert Flick, to produce images like A Long Picker. It's made up of single frames shot from a moving car along a single street in LA. The actual images lose their significance, and the constructed picture becomes the abstraction. Michael Kenner is a less radical minimalist, but some of his images could be described as pure abstractions. The new topographic photographer Louis Baltz used minimalistic ideas to emphasize the claustrophobic geometric shapes that are imposed on Americans living in these newly constructed suburban developments. He limits the context of the building, and all the viewer is left with is abstract patterns of construction elements. His images reflect a social commentary, but they also link the process of photography to the mechanical process of mass production. Then abstract art photography moved into a place where it's often difficult to see whether the picture is a photograph at all. Marco Breuer examined the surface of the photograph itself. It's difficult to imagine how much further the deconstruction of photography can go. Possibly with AI, there may be a way to go. There's also been an emphasis on the cultural, the political, and the ideological. And this has allowed photographers like Wolfgang Tillmans to emerge with his Everything Matters exhibitions. The rise of digital and the nostalgia for analog has led many to return again to explore the physical nature of the medium itself. When Californian photographer Chris McCaw accidentally left the lens hood off his camera during a night shoot, it captured the rising morning sun, and the bright light burnt a streak across his film. In the process, the light streak solarized the negative, converting it into a positive. These are some of his images from his ongoing series called Sunburn. One of the results of technical innovation is the rise of drone photography. This allows photographers to look down onto the surface of the earth and extract two-dimensional abstract images. We've all seen a lot of these during the past few decades, but last century one would have had to hire a helicopter or an aeroplane in order to take these images. I'll run a selection at the end of the video. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.